Today's daf is daf Kuf Beis. So the last thing we're learning about was that according to Rab Shimon, food, that something is not makabel tuma unless it's considered food, and if something is asa bahana, it's not considered food. And then we said, so how come in some instances, and we said by bas b'chol and so on and so forth, he says that if it had a shas hakosher, if there was a time that it was permitted to be eaten, then even though right now it isn't, that's considered oichel, is considered food. And then we brought different brises, and we said that l'chayda, according to Rab Shimon, we have this principle that since it was row, like by paraduma, since you could have redeemed it, it's as if you redeemed it already. So l'chayda, then all kabbanos, since you could have sprayed the blood, should already considered shas hakosher. So how can you say before by korban mincha that pigel, never had a shas hakosher, so therefore there's no what do you call it? There's never had a shas hakosher, and therefore it's not considered oichel. So he answered, it's talking about that you did it 1 minute. You did it 1 minute before shkia. If you did it 1 minute before shkia, so then there was no potential for you to spray it. And what about pigel? It's talking about that you did the pigel during the shchita, so there was never a potential to be sprayed. From the beginning, it was no good. Says he, what I said, Rabashi said, about 10 lines on top of the page of Kuf Beis and Aleph, I'll give a different approach. Which is impossible. A lot of these Gemaras, you have Rabashi with Rava, Ravina with Rava. The Rambam doesn't learn like Rashi. Rashi learned that Rabashi literally was born the day that Rava passed away. And Rav Nachman was Rava's Rebbe. So it's impossible. And Rav Nachman passed away before Rava. So it's impossible. Novos. So Teja brings us Rav Kahana. We had two Rav Kahanas. Other different gesois, but the Rambam doesn't take it literally. He learns that the leadership of Rav Ashi happened after Rava passed away. So according to that, it's quite possible. Maybe all these little things that we have in Shas, where Rav Ashi and Rav and all that, it's quite possible that the Rambam therefore takes it literally. That it's possible that Rav Ashi talked to Rav Nachman. We don't know how old Rav Ashi was. If he lived in the times of Rava. Anyway. Then we have some other Ravashi, which definitely is not Ravashi, a Chiba Ravashi, and we see talking to Rav. So it's so obviously there were four Ravashis. But anyway, and I said like this: let's say that it was mamish lon. That means that you did not do zrika, and you only did it the next day. And it was you had a potential to spray, and according to Rab Shimon, since a color Aymed Lizard Kizaruk Damis, as if you sprayed it already, there was a Shasa Kosher in theory. So why do you say it's not Eichel? Vafil Tema the Pigel Bezrika. And even you want to say that the Pigel was not by Shchita, took place in a Zrika. So therefore, again, it had a potential to be kosher because as soon as if you did the Shchita, you could spray it already. So the Shasa Kosher, so how come it's not considered Eichel? And your questions, and where do you see that Rav Shimon holds that we believe in potential by paraduma? We said you can redeem the paraduma because on the maracha you could have redeemed it, when before you went ahead and burnt it down and made it ashes. So that's why he said that the paraduma is metamatu. It's considered oichel. So he says a big difference. There's a difference between saying, "Oh, you could have redeemed it." As Rashi says, redeeming it is mainly talking. Words is not a ma'aseh. So therefore, you can say the paraduma is considered oichel because you could have redeemed it before you burned it. Mashenke, when it comes to over here, you actually have to spray the blood. You have to do a ma'aseh. Cold man, you didn't do it. You didn't do it. So just because you had a potential doesn't mean anything. So it's not considered oichel. Even though you could have sprayed the blood, that's not considered oichel because you didn't. Lepa, you didn't. When I ask a question, Rashi Meisel asks a question that says, "Klal Omar Rabbi Shimon says klal. Kol shahayil ishas meila is if you're stealing from the base of Migdash, but if something then was transferred from Hegdish to the Kohanim, even for a moment, and then afterwards something else happened to it, is no longer meila. The moment it left the domain of Hegdish and it entered the domain of the Kohanim, and now you use it, meila there isn't. No chaymisa, there's no carbon, mila there isn't. And the more will give us some examples. The Baraisa is good examples. I'm Rabbi Shua said, if it ever had a moment that was mutter for the kohanim, ain't mo'ilim. After that, it's no longer considered the Eibush, it's no longer considered hegdish, and therefore you're not stealing from the Eibush. Even though right in this moment, you couldn't really use it. But if you never had a shas het kohanim, what's the example? The Eizu shas het kohanim, what do you mean? For example, That while you left to stay overnight, and it had a shas heter. What's a shas heter l'chayre? That you could have sprayed the blood. So we see clearly from here that the fact that you could have sprayed the blood is called a shas heter. We do say, not like Rav Ashi said that spraying the blood. We don't say imagine he did it. Or ushanitma, let's say it became tameh again. You could have sprayed the blood before it became tameh. Or shiyatza. These are all psul. You took it. So right now it's not mutter, but because there was a moment that was mutter, if you use it, at least you're not moyel. You'll do other avedas too, you see, but you weren't moyel. So what is he from all of this? But potential to spray the blood as if you did. And you, Rav Ashi, said that we don't say that by zrika. What's an example? We had no shas heter. From the moment of shchita, you already had it all wrong, so there's no shas heter. Or chutz l'mekayim, you shechted it, you already had him in the wrong place. Again, it never had a moment of heter, because while the animal's alive, it was hegdish and also an animal behemo b'chayel cheskel yisrael medis. While it's alive, you can't eat it. And the moment you shechted it, you already ruined it. So it never left the kodesh to go to the kodesh l'kayim, and therefore you are moil. Or shekiblu psulin v'zarkas dama. Or if a kosel kohen received it, and we're having another Gemara in different Masechta where the question is v'zarkas dama is the same kohen who did both, or even just did either one. But however we look clearly in the beginning, my lab lona mamish, that you left her over noiser and you didn't spray the blood for the following day, and therefore we say that it's considered as if there was a shas kosher. Where was the shas kosher? Because it could have sprayed the blood. So it's not like Rav Ashi. Over here, all it is you could have done zrika, but it's no longer considered hekdesh of Hashem because it had a shas heter that you could have sprayed. So the Gemara, no. Ruya, Lot says, Ruya, Latame, and Rashi omits the next two words. And they're saying here, in other words, it was lon straight away, and it had a potential to become a psul of tameh, a psul of yaitze. In other words, it's talking about you already sprayed the blood. When is tumah and all of these things a problem? That's the only problem. After you spray the blood, there's no other issues. Everything's done properly. Now, if you did yaitze, the only isur is yaitze. If you did tumah, the only isur is tumah. So when it says over here that it was tameh or yaitze, it's talking about in a case where the only psul will be tumah, the only psul will be yaitze. And the lana is not a case of the only psul is lana. Lana is if it was lana after the zrika. You did the zikr. So therefore, why was there shas heter there? Not because there's a potential to be zaydik. You actually did the zikr. You did the zrika here, and now when you take it, so therefore, if you took it yaitze and you or you made a tameh and you ate it, we're going to say you're chai for eating a tameh, you're chai for yaitze, but you're not going to be liable for mi'ila, because since you sprayed the blood, it's no longer mi'ila. That's what he's saying here. So you might have said avalina mamish mai. So what would it be? Let's say if it literally you didn't spray the blood right till the following day, is hakin on mile. Taka would be mile. You got to be mile. Right, that's what you're saying here, because we don't believe in this kol oimid l'zadik kazadami. Ebazei, why?
Using the same logic, why didn't it say kol oimid l'tamei kilu nitma? I mean,
because nothing's oimid l'tamei. No. Zrika you have to do. You don't have to make it tamei. You don't have to take your zrika. You have to do. So we're saying, even though you didn't do it yet, since you have to do it, it's as if you already did it. Right, because that's
even if it was long, even you left the whole day and the whole night.
No, that's too late then. So we're saying here is, let's say you did an hour before Shkia. An hour before Shkia, you could have done the zrika. So there's a shas heter right now. You didn't do the zrika. It's still considered eichel. It's still considered that you took it away from the hegdish of the Eibishter.
For the zrika, while you can still do zrika.
Yeah, even though you didn't do zrika, the fact that you could have is good enough. That's what we're saying. Rav Ashi is saying no. When it comes to zrika, we don't say it's good enough because zrika requires a maisa. Anything that requires a pool, do it. And because you didn't do it, you can't imagine as if it happened. I bet paraduma there. All you have to do is say a few words. Says the Gemara, that's the pshat. So in other words, it's takamuta. You did the zrika. Not that you had there was a window of opportunity, but you say much more than a window. You're saying that right now it's already after the zrika. So the lashon is incorrect. Hi kosher hoyula shas hetel koinim. Hoyula means there was a window. Before you could have done it, and that's what you're saying, right? The Braisa says if there was a window before, then it's no longer mila. If there was no window before, there is mila. Should have said right now, because once you did the zik, it's right now with the kainim. Now the boss have another problem called Yaitse, another problem that came to me. Or the wording is wrong. Hello, Rashi says, I'll give you a different answer. Yeah, you're right. Maybe even Zika, we will say, like there's a issue here. No, boss. You asked a question here from Meila, I'll tell you. Meila atumik karamid. You're asking me a question here that by Meila we say it's no longer stealing from the Eibishter. And then you're asking a question, atumik. How can we say that it's not considered? You ask a question. How come you tell me it's not considered? You had a chance to be zaydik, right? You ask me. I'll tell you the difference. Meila, the whole word to Meila is kedusha v'lav kedusha. Does it belong to hegdish? Does not belong to hegdish? So therefore, since there was a window opportunity to be zaydik, and if you would have done that, there's no longer part of hegdish. The pokulei kedusha said that window already reduced its kedusha, because prior to that window, it's hegdish. You can't do anything. Now you have a window, just be zaydik, and everything's mutter. So that window itself reduced the kedusha. The my hadar rechavla. So how are you going to ride it back? How are you going to bring back the kedusha, even though the window's gone, right? Because you had London, you left it overnight. But poil, you reduce the kedusha. Once the kedusha is gone, it doesn't come back by itself. But tumah, what's tumah? The whole din of tumah is it considered food? Is it edible food or not? Tumah mishum oichla kol heicha di ba yizorik matzizorik mashulei. So if even though the window is tumah umetama tumah, when do we buy oichlin? We look at it right now. If right now you could have fixed it up, then it's oichel. If you cannot fix it up, it's not oichel. Heichli boy zodik le matzi zodik. But if you can't be zodik anymore, le mashra le oichel. You cannot. It's not considered oichel. Metam tum is oichel. We look at the here and now. If right now it's oichel, all it is the question: is it a food or is it not a food? So right now is it a food or not a food? If right now it's not a food, even though yesterday you could have sprayed, or an hour ago you could have sprayed the blood. Fine, there's a window before, but right now. It's ready. You did lono. You left it overnight. You didn't spray the blood. What's helped me that yesterday, you could have sprayed the blood, but right now you can't. So it's not eichel. That's the criteria. Makes us another question. Maybe Asham Toli. Somebody brought an Asham Toli. Now Asham Toli is you don't know if you sin. You ate a piece of fat, so you don't know if it's kosher, whether it was shuman, whether it was chaylev, or treif. You don't know. And because you don't know, you bring a korban called Asham Toli. If tomorrow you find out it definitely was treif, you have to bring another korban chatas. It doesn't take. What it does is it takes away any yisurim or anything else. The whole thing was built on a suffix. We'll learn all about this in Sefta Krisis. So maybe Asham Toli, the noida, and he found out shalachata. They actually didn't do a sin. So it depends. So before he shechted, he found out, then Yotze contra Meir, it's chulin. Nothing happened. It's not really a carbon because you never decide to be a carbon for a specific event. He just said maybe. Well, it turned out to be there's nothing there. He didn't do anything yet. Nothing happened. Goes back to chulin. Be'eda goes back to the stad. It goes back to your flock. These are words of Meir. Because you didn't sin. What do you do? Acham say no. Yida, since you set it aside on a suffix, and why? Because if you, why did you set aside Lashon Torah? You're a Frumiyid, you have a conscience, and it bothers you. Maybe I take a treif. So you meant it with an emes. I want this to be a carbon, right? To calm down your conscience, and therefore, even though it turned out to be you didn't do an aveda. But at the time, you meant it should be a carbon. So Yida, you have to let it wander about that. You start for a contract to mum, and you will, and the money falls into the dava. Rabbi Lezer says, that's the view of the Chacham. Rabbi Lezer says, Yakriv, he says, not only it has kedusha, you have to let it wander about till it gets a mum and sell it with the money. No, he says, bring the carbon up. If he didn't do this Aveda, he did some other Aveda. Everyone did some Aveda somewhere that you're not sure about. He says there, and we'll learn, in the Gemara Krishna that there were certain Tanaim who used to bring a carbon ashram every day in their life, because maybe they didn't Aveda. The people who don't need to bring an ashram used to bring, and the people who do need an ashram didn't. Maybe he did other sins, so you still bring it. That's before it happened. What about Mishnah Ishchit? What about You thought you did possibly I didn't Aveda, and you shachted, and then you found out you never did an Aveda. What happens now? You found out that you never did an Aveda. What do you do now? Now, so what happened? It turned out to be that this wasn't really a carbon. The fact is, it's not a carbon. So Hadam Yishpach, what do you do with blood? What you did was you brought a chulin into the Azara. Pour out the blood. The Habasi said about the meat, because it turned out to be you never did an Aveda. The whole thing is, that was before you did anything. So before you did anything, the Mary says, Nothing happens. It's not a carbon. Chum say it already has a kedusha of a carbon.
So Chum used to bring them even if they didn't.
One Tana. That was the third. That was the third Rabbi Lezer. But the other, everyone else disagrees with them. They say this is specific. You can't just put it on any other way. It's specific. Yeah, this is a specific cause. You bought it for this shuman, and then turned out to be that it wasn't a Veda. So you brought chulin as a carbon, which you can't do, but it's not your fault. He's Adam Yishaver, Babasa used to burn the flesh. What happens? You went a stage further. You thought that maybe I didn't have Veda, and Nizrik Adam. You actually sprayed the blood. Habasa Yochel. In that case, and then you found out that you never did an Aveda. The Kohanim can eat. Why? Because at the time when you did all the stages, you did the right thing. It was a suffix. When you shechted, it was a suffix. When you sprayed the blood, it was a suffix. You thought maybe I didn't Aveda. So you did everything correctly. So therefore, it was brought, and that's what the carbon is for a suffix. So therefore, everything's kosher, and the Kohanim can eat it. But Rabbi Yasi says
So what did it become? Lachar Ma'is, you found that.
It's
Shlomim or something? Or?
No, it was a Nasham. That's exactly what Nasham totally is. What happens if he found out what he definitely did do an Aveda, then you got to bring a Karbachatus. The Shlom doesn't take, the Ashram didn't take care of that. Here he found he did not do an Aveda. But Rabbi Yasi says, Afilu Hadam Bekois. Rabbi Yasi says, even if he didn't spray the blood yet, but you're already prepared to spray the blood, you put it in the cup. Yizrik, continue. And you found out at that stage that I didn't do an Aveda. Continue. Why? And you should eat the meat. Why? What's the svara? The svara will be, it's as if you sprayed it already. It's as if you sprayed it already. So why not? It's as if you already did the carbon entirely. So just continue with that process spraying. Kasha Rabashi, clearly we say here that what? But when it comes to kabbanis, we say kizaruk dami. You just said it's only by tumah. He received something to do with tumah. Says the Gemara, who said that's the reason? Okay, Rava said that's the reason. Midu time, Amri Maravin, it's a give a whole different reason altogether. They say the Ksava he holds clay sharas mekatchinas absolute because he put the blood in the kais, and the kais is a holy keli, it belongs to the base of Midrash, is therefore it's mekadesh even though it's possible, not because kala aimid lezadik azardami. Once you put in the keli, it became completely holy, and therefore you have to continue the process. As mekatchin is absolute, Rabbi Yasi holds that you go ahead and you continue because the klei was makdish this blood. Nothing to do with kala oimid lezadik, not a kasher Rashi. Since Rabbi Shimon holds kala oimid lezadik, in other words, the way we thought, not the first interpretation, Rava's interpretation of Rabbi Yasi, which is that he held that it's as if you sprayed it already, and kala oimid lezadik nami kesar dami, and so too anything which is so the same logic, anything which is about to be burnt, let's say noise.
That would be after the zikah.
No. We're talking about what's in the cup. He said if the blood is already in the cup, and you found out you didn't do an aveda, continue. Spray the blood. Why? Because while it's in the cup, it's as if you sprayed it already.
No, you said with the streifa. When would you say kol ha'imid l'sarek? Only after the zikah, okay?
Yeah, but let's say in a case of noiser, kol ha'imid l'sarek kesara dami. We had this concept kol ha'imid l'sarek also by Lulav, right? Or a shade tree is. So noiser. So he asks a question. So noiser and potter, amai metam doichel. In the din by noiser, you have to burn it. And we say that if you touch noiser, you become tamei. The din by potter dumi is if it's tamei, you become tamei. Since you have to burn it, it's as if it's burnt already. What is it? Ash. So why are you tamei? Tumas oichlin. I thought about it. It's only ashes. It's nothing. It's dust. So why would you be over? You know why? Those two, because you're so excited about the fact that you're doing a carbon, you're doing the right thing with a carbon, you are machshavit. You, the person, makes it chashav that even though it's only afer, it's ashes, it's offer or dust. It's as if you we had the Gemara that offer and afer as interchangeable. So it's as if you gave it achila. The status of Achila. Okay, I understand that what? That Chibas HaKodesh can what? Make it possible to go. Are you telling me also that you can make it now, it should be like Oichlin, Tame, and therefore Yishim Vesheni? So it sounds to me what you're saying here is because Chibas HaKodesh, that the Paraduma now is generates Tumah, and so does the Noise passes on Tumah, and this will resolve a question that we were asked. The Shlakish asked if when we Chibas HaKodesh, does it make it so choshev that it actually it's like a rishon l'tumah, you can make a sheni l'tumah. You tell me clear. Even though it itself becomes possible, but can it pass on to others? And it sounds like you can. Says the Gemara Kima, but the Shlaka Deraisa. He's asking Mahatoida, do we say that it can pass on? Kibas HaKodesh is that strong that it can pass on the Tumah? Or but Kikam Rabbanan, we're talking here where Midrabanan it does. Right? The Shlaka is asking about Mahatoida. Mishnah. Remember, there are different kinds of karmenachas. The guy says, I take upon myself to bring this and discover it in a frying pan, a very, the thin wafer. Real loyal. The Heavy Macheshes, but Lepoil, so when he made the nether, he said Machmas. But Lepoil, he brought a Macheshes, he brought the deep fried. Or the Macheshes, the Heavy Machmas. He didn't do what he said. So the dinner is as follows. Masha Heavy. We'll say it's a new carbon. We'll say this is not the carbon that you made a nether on. You decided to bring another mincha. So what you brought is a valid carbon. But this is not the nether that you made. What about if he said zu lahavi b'machli? You point at the flour. You say this flour, I'm gonna make it a minchas machlas, and they macheshes or maches b'machlas then possible. Because here you clearly said you can't say that this is another carbon mincha because in your nether you said harei zu this flour. That's case number one. Case number two, which is very similar. I'm going to bring two Israelis. Mincha normally is one measure. I'm going to bring two Israelis, but I'm going to bring it in one keli. And then maybe it's keli. You brought it in two kelim. The problem with bringing in two kelim is now you have to have two kmitzvahs. And you said two Israelim, and now each keli only has one Israel. So you didn't really carry out your neder. Do you know what we're going to say? It's a different mincha. B'shnei kelim, or the other way around. Shnei kelim, I'm going to bring in two kelim, two kmitzvahs. They have a kli echad. So you can have now a surplus because he said, you can have two Israelis and one keli, and you only have one kmitzvah. Masha heavy. So it's another carbon. You didn't fulfill your neder. But if he said elu b'kli echad, the heavy b'shnei, if you point at it, and you say this I'm going to bring in one keli, and then you brought in two. Then or b'shnei kelim b'kli echad, so you can't say this is another mincha because I pointed clearly, but this is what I'm going to do. So it's possible. What happens? The following case, interesting. I said I'm going to bring two Israelis in one keli, and then the Hebishne kelim. But what happens is, people standing around said, "Hey, we heard you make this neder," and they told him, "You said clearly b'klei echad, no darta. You said clearly it's what klei echad." So here you cannot go ahead and say, and he didn't answer them. You cannot say he's bringing another mincha. Because he would have said, this is not what are you talking about? This is a different mincha altogether. He didn't say that. Or it's as if now he's changing. He's trying to bring the mincha of his neder here. Now, that's a problem. Or he krivim b'shnei kelim psulim b'klei echad, and he krivim b'shnei kelim psulim. What about the other way around? B'klei echad, if he brought it b'klei echad the way he originally said kosher, if he brought in two kelim, it's possible. In this case, it's possible. Why? You can't say it's another carbon because they contested what he did, and he didn't defend himself. Similar thing. He said, bringing two kelim, behave b'klei one keli. Omle told him, hey, b'shnei kelim the dart. He said two. He krivim b'shnei kelim shein. It's kosher. But if you put it in one keli, we're going to treat. We're not going to say it's possible. We're going to say it's like you did two different menachas that got mixed up together, and we had a din before that if there's sufficient to make two kmitzvahs, then it's all right. The first part of the Mishnah says it's not all right. It's talking about he didn't have enough to make two kmitzvahs. So
if it's possible, what do they do with it then?
They burn it or throw it out in the Trumas Hadesh. They had the place where they disposed of it.
As with other things. Okay.
Yeah. We need both of these cases. We need the first case, which we talk about a machvas, and the case about kli echad. The principle is the same. So you want to quick? We'll just go to the next mission. We need yesh min hakamais. We only do the case of he said, machvas one kind of wafer, then it turned into another one. But machvas kamais and machesh. The problem is that it's a different mincha altogether. Okay, I understand why you haven't fulfilled your neder. In the second part, you brought exactly what you said, just the quantity. It wasn't the quality; it was the quantity. You're right. You brought two Australians or two kelim, one keli. They need namayotza. Maybe we say neder. As long as the quality, you brought the correct mincha, even though you bit more, or one keli, two keli, maybe makes no difference. That's why the Mishnah tell you it is a difference. Over here, the problem is you divide it. You have two kmitzvahs. It's a big problem. You said you're going to put it all in one keli, which means one kmitzvah, and then you divide it into two, or the other way around. You didn't divide. You did exactly the full amount you said. Just you changed the format. A malay if you need it. We have another view of Reb Shimon, which is not quoted in the Mishnah. Masha heavy. Our Mishnah says that it's like another mincha, but you wouldn't fulfill your neder. Reb Shimon says afide nider namayotze. Reb Shimon says you also yoyse your neder. Reb Shimon says you yoyse your neder as well. In other words, he says it's good enough. You fulfilled your neder because you said he said it's not what you said at the time. It's when you put the keli that determines, that's the final determination. The fact that you put into macheshet, and the mice, if you remember, it hadn't been in the Masechta, the mice speaks louder than the words. And the mice shows that that's what you wanted, and therefore that's the moment that counts. Studying Marazul, having machlis, what time we learn like kitchum klishadas. So you tell me it's possible since you put in the wrong amount or you put in the wrong mincha, the klei shadas is not going to be mekadosh. Why can't you just take it out of the klei shadas and start again? Start again. Says the Gemara. Excuse me. We're talking about the case where you said this flour is going to be for a machlis, and then you went ahead and you put it into the other one. So why can't you just, since the clay, you put it into a keli? You brought it in one keli, now you put it into another keli, and before you fried it, once you fry it, it's too late already. You put it in another keli, I'm going to do this for a machlis. And so, what's the big deal? And they said, then you decide you want to do a machlis. Take the flour out of the keli and start again, as long as you didn't fry it yet. When we say klei shadas is not mekadosh, that means it's not suitable to bring on the mizbeach. I will kitchen apostle, but the klei shadas now passed it because you said machlis, and now you want to change the macheshet that passes it. Abaye says, when is all this spoken? Talking about when at the time you made the promise, vow, you said this is what I want to do. If during that day you just started bringing minchas tam, you didn't say what it is, and then you go ahead and you set it aside. You say, you know what, I'm going to bring this for the sake of a machlis. Loi kasha nadarta, but loi kasha loi knows no problem. Why? Because it says in pasuk kasha nadarta. Make sure you fulfill what you said. Loi kasha frash. We don't care at the time when you set it aside what you said then. It's only the time you made the neder. In fact, even now, only b'shas neder. Aval b'shas hafrosha. But if at the time of hafrosha you decide what it is, loi kasha nadarta, loi kasha frashta. Okay, have a good day. We'll continue.